This album is the first album from the band Yes. Now, some neat little thing about this particular version that I have is it's the 2003, I think, expanded remasters. Anyways, this was supposed to have been I think this was the British cover of the album, and then this was the American cover of the album, or it could have been the other way around. Either way, two different covers for the album, except for the version that I got, which was an import, so obviously this was the British version. Has the other picture on the back. This album was put together in 1969 by Yes, and at the time, their band consisted of different members of the band than what you would consider to be the classical era of Yes. The classical era of Yes featured Steve Howe and Rick Wakeman and later on Alan White. However, this particular version of Yes had a different guitar player and a different keyboardist. Peter Banks was the guitar player and Tony Kaye was the keyboardist. And so when Yes put this particular album together, what they did was they created a different sort of environment than what people were used to. Now, don't get me wrong, they still, I mean, the album sounds in parts like it is from the 60s psychedelic era, and it is. But the debut album combines what was going on at the time, which was you had a few separate groups. You had the experimental side of the 60s psychedelic movement going on. Bands like Pink Floyd, doing experimental stuff like Gumma, which we'll talk about because the Floyd, I'm going to do the entire Floyd canon next. So what we're going to do is a Pink Floyd marathon, and where I review all the albums in a row. So anyways, but what they did was they took the blues-based rock jams and the sort of experimental psychedelic sound and a lot of classically trained and jazz trained musicians were around at that time and were interested in the pop scene or the rock scene, and so some of these guys came together and created some music. Chris Squire, who's the bass player for Yes, was classically trained in the choir. He sang in the choir. And so he knew a lot about vocal harmonies, and John Anderson knew a lot about vocal harmonies. And so what they did was they created this album, the debut album, and it combines a lot of those things together. It's a bit heavy on the structured side because these guys are like Pink Floyd was structured in where Sauce Full of Secrets sounds like it's improvisation, but it's not structured, and so is most of what Yes does. I don't know of anything really that they do that's improv. So this was a very structured album. It has a few sweet gems in it, though, and they're very jazzy, and jazz is big on improv, but you can tell that they're not improv; they're structured. Yes just has this sound that you can tell that they're structured. I don't have time for your Facebook. But Yes is a band that's about composition and structure and classical music textures and things of that nature, and the musicians themselves are virtuosos. I mean, Chris Squire plays lead guitar on bass. I mean, if this tells you anything, Bill Bruford was a drummer for Yes, one of the greatest drummers in the world. Neil Peart from Rush talks very highly of Bill Bruford. But much of their style does not really follow the conventional rock music formats. And so you need to forget the 80s and Owner of a Lonely Heart. This is 1969, Yes. So totally different band. Let me get into the album a little bit. But the album, basically what it does is it takes all the structures that I mentioned earlier and combines them. And we'll start with, like, in the beginning song, Beyond and Before, is a very upbeat, melodic, very light song. It's almost, I would consider it almost as if it were the yin yang, the yang to the yin, I suppose, of the Doors' Break On Through to the Other Side. If the Doors represent the darker side, Yes represents the more celestial realm. This song is a driving piece of music with full of vocal harmonies and mystical type lyrics. You know, a lot of prog has that. If you know about prog, if not, you'll learn very quickly about that. Some more songs. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll tell you a little bit about some of the ones that I think stand out, and that's Yesterday and Today. It's a very touching sort of ballad, very tender. Takes you back to sort of like the 60s hippie era. It's like a hippie love song in a way. And, but it's very, very melodic, very tender ballad written by John Anderson. And speaking of the hippie era, this album also has 2 cover songs on it. A lot of people back then did cover songs. I don't know of any that, any prog bands that had 2 cover songs on their first album, but Yes did. They had a cover song from the Byrds and the Beatles. And I think that the covers of these 2 songs rival the originals. Yes has a superior musical talent, and they have the ability to take either complex structures or simple structures and turn it into Yes, and you can, you feel that you can determine, the Yes brand, so to speak. I hate to use that term, but you know how it is. You hear somebody and you kind of know who it is. And Yes has that, even though they're very complex. By far, the standout song on the album is Survival, the very last song. I think, now it's not the very last song on the particular copy that I have, because I have the 2003 remastered edition, and it has like, let's see, 5, 6 extra song bonus tracks on it. So, but on the original LP, Survival was the last song. And I think it stands out. I think it shades ahead of any song on the album. Not to say that any song is bad, but this one is that good. This is what Yes is going to be in the future. We're in 1969, and this is what Yes is going to be in the future. This very complex, structured sound. Prog. This is prog. It's the most progressive song on the album. It has a very hard-hitting beginning. It's like dun 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 dun, and then it sort of segues into this very soft, ethereal sound with John Anderson's very celestial vocals taking the song somewhere. It changes up off and on, of course, and then it ends. The best song on the album by far. I call it a piece rather than a song, because it's because of the way it's structured. It's very prog. But as far as the album is concerned, do I consider it an essential prog album? Probably not. I would say on the prog scale, you're looking at a 3 or 3.5, as far as that's concerned. As far as progressive at the time, I would give it a little higher rating. I'd give it a 4. It was very progressive for the time, and it was a pioneering album. And of course, it was the debut album of one of the greatest prog bands, if not the greatest prog band in the history of progressive music, and that's Yes. So I would recommend you pick up a copy of it. I think it is essential as far as a pioneering album is concerned, if you want to hear what early Yes sounds like, and if you enjoy that type of stuff. And I would recommend it. Go out and pick up a copy of it. Again, I'll put links down at the bottom to Yes's Facebook and Yes's website where you can check it out, and you can check all this stuff out. I think it's streaming on Spotify if you want to listen to it. Don't get it confused with the Yes album. That came in 1970 or 71, I think. It was their third album, actually. You had Yes, Time and a Word, and the Yes album. This one is the first album, just called Yes. So if you want to listen to it, find this cover on Spotify or purchase it. I'm sure you'll enjoy it once you hear it. Or this, whichever copy. This may be the American version. You may see this version, whatever. I think on Spotify it's this one. So check it out. Yes by Yes. Mr. Prog recommends it.